The sun had begun its slow descent, casting long shadows that stretched across the empty street. I stood there, a silent witness to a scene of devastation, my heart heavy with grief and confusion. I had lost my entire family, and I couldn't remember how or why it had happened. The police officers on the scene were trying their best to piece together the puzzle, but my mind was a fog of fragmented memories and unanswered questions. They asked me again and again, their voices tinged with frustration. "What happened here, Mr. Walker? Can you remember anything?" I shook my head, my voice trembling as I replied, I don't know. I can't remember." The officers exchanged uneasy glances, and I could see the doubt in their eyes. How could I explain that my memory was a jumbled mess of confusion and fear? The house itself stood as a chilling testament to the horrors that had occurred within its walls. It was a modest suburban home, now stained with blood and shrouded in an eerie silence. My wife Mary and our 2 children, Emily and Daniel, had lived there in happiness and love. But that happiness had been shattered, leaving only a painful void. The investigation was relentless, with the police poring over every inch of the crime scene. They interviewed neighbors, reviewed security footage, and even searched my car for any clues that might shed light on what had happened that fateful night. Despite their best efforts, the evidence remained elusive. There were no signs of forced entry, no indication of a break-in, and no weapon to be found. It was as if the house itself held the answers, but they remained tantalizingly out of reach. In the days that followed, I was subjected to countless interviews and interrogations. The detectives probed my memory, seeking any scrap of information that might lead to a breakthrough. But all I could offer were fragments, a glimpse of my daughter's smile, the sound of my son's laughter, and the warmth of my wife's embrace. The police grew increasingly frustrated, and I couldn't blame them. I knew I was the prime suspect. After all, I was the only one left standing. My alibi, a blank void in my memory, offered little defense. One detective, Detective Reynolds, took a particular interest in me. He was relentless in his pursuit of the truth, and I couldn't fault him for it. He sat me down one evening in the stark interrogation room, the harsh fluorescent lights casting long shadows on the walls. "Mr. Walker," he began, his voice grave, "we need to figure out what happened to your family. You're our best chance at solving this." I nodded, my heart heavy with guilt and despair. "I want to remember, Detective. I want to know what happened to them." He leaned in closer, his eyes searching mine. "Try to relax, take a deep breath, and think back to that night. Anything, no matter how small, could help." I closed my eyes, trying to push through the haze that clouded my memories. Fragments emerged, whispers in the dark, the sound of glass shattering, and a chilling sense of dread. But nothing concrete, nothing that could provide a definitive answer. Days turned into weeks, and the investigation seemed to stall. Detective Reynolds and his team were running out of leads, and the pressure was mounting. The town was gripped by fear, and my name was synonymous with tragedy. One evening, as I sat alone in my empty home, I heard a familiar sound, the laughter of my children echoing through the walls. I followed the sound, my heart pounding in my chest, and found myself in their bedroom. The room was bathed in an eerie, ethereal light, and there they were, Emily and Daniel, standing before me, their faces frozen in twisted expressions of pain and anguish. My wife, Mary, stood behind them, her eyes filled with accusation. "Ben," they whispered in unison, their voices like a haunting refrain. "You did this to us." I recoiled in horror, my mind flooded with images of that fateful night, the argument, the rage, and the unspeakable act that had torn my family apart. Tears streamed down my face as I confronted the truth, the memories flooding back like a tidal wave. I had killed them, my own family, in a fit of rage and madness. But the guilt and horror had driven me to block out the memories, to erase the truth from my mind. As I stood there, surrounded by the specters of my family, the police arrived, responding to a neighbor's frantic call. They found me in that room, lost in a nightmare of my own making. The truth had finally come to light, and there was no escaping it. I was arrested, my family's voices echoing in my ears as I was led away in handcuffs. In the end, the relentless search for answers had brought me face to face with a horrifying reality. I had been my own worst enemy, a prisoner of my own shattered mind, and the horror of what I had done would haunt me for the rest of my days. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this story.